I'm so very happy to learn from the reflections, sharing of Father, from the vocation, the searching, the struggles, the inner struggles, intellectual versus very overwhelming. Uh, it's so beautiful to just reflect that it is not religion, but faith. When people are people of faith, then there will be unity that's possible. And I remember John 17:21, when Jesus said before he returned to the Father that all may be one. So after all, it will be possible. Okay, thank you. For our second speaker, so totally different from science, no? But with a science background, technology background. I would like to call on Professor Joel Sagut, Director of the Center for Theology, Religious Studies, and Ethics, to introduce our second speaker.
Good morning. It is my honor to present to you our next speaker, Most Reverend Archbishop Jose A. Cabantan, the Archbishop of Cagayan de Oro. Archbishop Joe received his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the Cebu Institute of Technology in Cebu City. Then he proceeded to complete his master's degree in pastoral ministry at St. John Vianney Theological Seminary in Cagayan de Oro City. And later, he completed his licentiate in sacred theology at the Loyola School of Theology in Quezon City. He was ordained a priest on April 30, 1990, for the Metropolitan Archdiocese of Cagayan de Oro. He then worked as associate pastor at the cathedral and then as administrator of the San Roque Parish of Catarman, Camiguin. From 1995 to 1997, he was Dean of Studies at the San Jose de Mindanao Seminary in Cagayan de Oro. He was also a director of the San Jose Seminary in Quezon City and as a formator at the St. John Vianney Theological Seminary in Cagayan de Oro. Before he was elected as bishop, he was the pastor of the Medalla Milagrosa Parish in Cagayan de Oro. On February 18, 2010, he was elected Bishop of Malaybalay, Bukidnon, and was consecrated on April 30. He was transferred on June 23, 2020, when Pope Francis appointed him to his current work as Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Cagayan de Oro. Within the Episcopal Conference of the Philippines, Archbishop Joe served as President of the Episcopal Commission for Basic Communities, Basic Ecclesial Communities, and he is now a member of the Episcopal Commission on Indigenous People. To give us his talk on faith and science, a personal account and theological reflection, please join me in welcoming Most Reverend Archbishop Joe or Jose A. Cabantan, the Archbishop of Cagayan de Oro.
Reverend Father Janil Abogado, our Vice Victor for Research, Father Dr. Bernard Tongol, and our Professor Joel, who introduced me, our co-speakers, Father Nebres. He was the provincial of the Jesuits when St. John Vianney started. We were the first batch of the seminary, and he visited us during the first year when we had our seminary in Manresa at the time, Cagayan de Oro. To all distinguished guests who come here, and to all of us, have a pleasant good morning to all of us. Good morning. First, my sharing is very personal, a personal account of my own experience, because when they wrote me about this, faith and science, I told them I finished engineering in 1979. So that was long ago. So what can I share? So I wrote to them, in fact, maybe you have chosen the wrong person. So they asked me just to write about my personal sharing about this topic on faith and science. So as I've said, this is really my personal view regarding faith and science as engineer who worked before in the factory and also as a priest and bishop today. So I would like to start with a quote attributed to St. Teresa of the Child Jesus. I don't know if it really comes from here, from her. You know what attracted me with this quote is that she used science to express her deep faith and commitment to Jesus. Her love for God, for Jesus, even an atom of her love, she will offer everything to the Lord. So that's what struck me in this passage, that could be also an opener regarding this talk about faith and science, offering her all, her even an atom of her love for the love of Jesus. And so with this faith and science, if we noticed here, regarding this two knowledge about faith and science, it intersects on the letter I, which means that the person with faith can also be a person of science. So the bias of my presentation is more on the compatibility, the relationship of faith and science. So as we have heard already, with regard to science, it deals with empirical data, conceivable by natural reason, whereas faith deals with the truths of our faith, the supernatural ones. Our faith is evidence-based. I'm glad to know this from E. Rogers' letter to Inventrop when he said, "A good fence helps to keep peace between neighbors." From here, I could say that, faith and science are two different fields of knowledge. They are distinct but not really separate. They are interrelated, they are interconnected. As we said, the person of faith can also be a person of science. And again, we mentioned it again here, that with science, it investigates the mysteries of the universe, as mentioned by Father Nibres, but while revelation offers us the truths for our salvation. Science deals with scientific methods, while faith, professed by a religion, will always be linked to an inner personal experience, religious experience. So, of course, you can read that there are some scientists who really espouse for the incompatibility between faith and science, because they said, religion teaches people to be satisfied with the trivial, supernatural, non-explanation. Religion teaches us to accept authority, revelation, and faith, instead of always insisting on evidence. That is why they thought that faith and science is really incompatible. But Pope Francis, in the encyclical Lumen Fidei, he also acknowledged that for modern age, belief is opposed to searching, and faith is regarded as an illusion, a leap into the void that impedes man's freedom. But with his encyclical, he tried to respond to this situation by introducing faith as that light that illuminates all man's existence to assist him in distinguishing good from evil. Of course, there are also scientists that espouse for compatibility. And they said, the science provides many opportunities to look for and find God in nature and to reflect on their beliefs. For instance, Kenneth Miller deals with the discourses of meaning and purpose. Religion deals with the question of meaning and of God in the first place, while science merely describes and explains them. So here we could say that faith and science is distinct. Faith and science is distinct, but not really separate. The omnipotent divine activity is always hidden. The Supreme Being cannot be reduced to any hypothesis, but at the same time, God can never replace God's creatures though everything that exists come from God, as we so believe. In our faith, we said that God may be all in all. He is an immanent God, but at the same time, He is also a transcendent God. He is hidden, but He is also very present in our midst, the abiding presence of God in our midst. And with that background, I would like to now go to my personal experience with regards to these two fields of science and faith. A throwback in the factory. I worked as a process engineer at Marinduque Mining Industrial Corporation, Surigao Nickel Refinery in the 1980s. And I also worked as a production foreman in our hometown, on home province, as a factory on ferrochrome. As a process engineer, we monitor the whole process from beginning to end, even from the mining area up to its end product, which is nickel. The byproduct of which is cobalt, and another byproduct is the tailings is iron or magnetite. So that is our task, to monitor the whole process. But aside from monitoring, we also do research to improve the process that can also save the company. For instance, one of the things that we do also to try to study that before throwing some materials or effluents into waste, perhaps we can also recycle them and reuse them for the process. And in that manner, the company can also save. In particular, I was assigned to even study on the tailings itself, the waste of the factory. The tailings is magnetite, but what we do during that research, what we did during that research is to upgrade the tailings, the magnetite, because that can be also used for another industrial purposes. So that is our work as process engineers. And also as a production foreman, of course, we said to it that we really have to achieve the process of the whole process of the whole company. Our product is ferrochrome. So as a production foreman, you also monitor and observe all the parameters so that we can arrive at we can achieve what we want to have in the company. Now with all this tells us that the field of science is always open to further discovery or research. So it is not a static field. That is why we continue to do research, innovate. It's always open for discovery. It's always open for research. In fact, as one author have said, the problem is not even one as simple as seeking more data to resolve the issue, but even requires a complete change in understanding the data. So even with that process, the whole process from the mining area to the end product is always open to research for innovation. And that is the field of science. Now, with that experience in the two factories, it led me to really also search for meaning. Like any other human being, chemical engineers also search for meaning in our lives. As we work in the factory, especially in the first factory that we worked in the faraway island, in Nonok Island in Surigao City. Yes, we were confronted with meaning which goes deeper than the empirical data we gathered. You know, in the research, we have to gather actual samples and data, analyze it, and also study it on it, and also make some conclusions to improve the whole process. But, you know, aside from doing that, we ask for deeper reasons of engaging in the scientific process, which is really impersonal and material. In the factory where I work, in the second factory as a production foreman, of course, we always monitor the machines that operates. But my question is, why do we continue to engage in this process? Why do we engage in these machines, which are really instrumental to production, but very impersonal? So, with that, it leads me to a deeper question: what's the meaning of all this? And for me, first is really to know the teleological end of this whole thing. Knowing that, for instance, the purpose of nickel, knowing that, for instance, the purpose of ferrochrome, and from nickel and ferrochrome are raw materials for producing stainless steel. And stainless steel is used in various fields of human endeavor. And with that, because of the teleological end of the products, it gives us meaning of our work, the why of what we are doing. We are doing this for the common good. We are doing this for humanity. So it's not just very impersonal, but we are doing this for others. So it gives us the motivation to work efficiently and effectively for the good of the whole humanity that uses it. Then, secondly, aside from that search for meaning deep inside us, is also that quest for the discovery of this unknown. Of course, those chemistry students here, you are very familiar with this experience of discovering the unknown in one of the laboratory exercises. It's really very fascinating. We do many experimentations until we finally conclude that this metal, for instance, is copper because it's a blue solution. It is magnesium because of the light it produces. That's part of discovering the unknown in the chemistry. Of course, it's very important, very significant in designing a factory, a plant design, in a plant or a factory, because all those physical properties, chemical properties, is really very useful in having that factory. But as we continue with that experiment, as we engage with this kind of process, we also somehow discover there is also that inner stirrings deep within us, trying to discover who is this, that, what am I looking for? Who am I looking for in life? So from faith perspective, this also relates well with our faith life's journey in discovering and seeking God's presence in our midst. Finding the unknown should not only lead us to know about the metal with all its properties, but should also lead us to more questions regarding the existence of such material. Of course, ultimately, it will bring us to the creator of the universe. From our faith perspective, it is God, our loving creator, who created both the living and non-living creatures. And in our theology, we said, we're all exemplars of God's creation. In fact, as we keep in touch also with our indigenous brothers and sisters, indigenous peoples, from their own wisdom, they call God as Magbabaya. Magbabaya as the creator of all that is. This was also God's response to Moses when Moses asked him about his identity, and God replied, I am who am. I am the God of existence. So in that process of discovering the unknown, there is also that inner movement trying to discover this God in our lives. And with that too, movement of searching for meaning and discovering this God in our lives, it led me to a deeper calling to where God is calling me, my vocation. And of course, first we have this, you have to realize that having faith, Having faith makes us humble and accept one to be coexistent with others. We're not alone in the whole world, in the whole universe. Then faith leads us to dialogue with all of creation and to dialogue with science as it reawakens the critical sense and broadens the horizon of reason, inviting us to behold the creation with wonder. And Pope Francis has said, this will allow us to humbly acknowledge God not just as an object to be known, but rather the subject who makes himself known. Encountering God. And as we said, and as I've said, this whole search for meaning and discovering this God leads me to an inner calling. So the vocation. Now, all those experiences in the plant site, in the factory, and all those experiences in the parish, even when we were still high school, and in the place where I worked, I was still active also in the parish. At least our experiences in the parish helps us that give meaning to our work in the spirituality and also the religious experiences in the parish. So all those experiences bring me to a very personal relationship with our Creator. So, as we said, encountering God in the factory would lead us to know Him more, who gives meaning to our life's journey and propel it. This has also filled the vacuum and direction of life's goal, responding to God's call. It would lead farther to discerning one's vocation and to respond to God, whom we personally relate with. So it's more of a personal relationship, as Father Nibres have mentioned in his talk. Personal relationship with our God. So the whole production process in the workplace also became the way of relating my vocation story while in the seminary. The seminary becomes a place where I can savor and release all those experiences that I had in the factory. That is why I considered myself, in my whole formation years in the seminary, I considered myself as that raw material from mining area up to the end product to be processed in the seminary towards an end goal of priesthood. Of course, you cannot just compare it as a mechanical process. I felt like undergoing the process of, mining, crushing, milling, refining, and roasting in God's furnace of love, being subjected into high energy of His warmth, to undergo the process of extraction, filtration, evaporation, countercurrent decantation. These are all the processes in the plant. But I consider my whole formation years as that undergoing that same process. Of course, it is painful, but it is part of purifying one's vocation. The transformation that occurs in every stage of the process also relates well with my formation years in the seminary, but also even in the priesthood and even our ongoing formation as bishop. Now, becoming a priest and my ministry as a priest now, what happens to my chemical engineering? First, I engaged in doing winemaking because it refreshes my college years. This is one of the elective subjects before, winemaking. What are the available fruits in the parish? And of course, going through the parish, the process of, fermentation, filtration, aging, at least somehow I can remember what I have experienced in the factory. And also, you can also help the lay ministers, especially, of course, the men, because also fond of drinking. Also, although what I produce are raw wine, but it's also tasteful, perhaps. So next is also, in our priestly ministry, people now are health conscious. People come to us and they said, offer us some machines that can produce alkaline water because alkaline water is good for anti-cancer. So another thing is the salt. No? People, before we were asked to use iodized salt, but when I was Bishop of Bukidnon, I noticed our church workers, they are promoting the use of rock salt, no? Going back to the old, not the iodized salt. Rock salt because of the health benefits of rock salt. Now, if you go to the store, there is also another salt, pink salt, Himalayan salt. But they're all the same salt. We know very well, as in our chemistry, this is still the same table salt, sodium chloride. But they said the health benefits are different. But that is why if we could relate that also in the gospel, when Jesus exhorts us to be salt of the earth, and in this era of new evangelization, what kind of salt you are or are we? Are we that pink salt? People are looking for new health benefits. Are you a rock salt or an iodized salt? In this era of new evangelization, we are looking for new methods, new fervor, new expression in spreading the gospel. And that is also what people perhaps are looking for at these times in our times today. And of course, another concern is for integral ecology. Encountering Christ in the factory enlarges the horizons of our existence and gives us a firm hope which will not disappoint. Faith enhances our lives then. Discovering God in the plant site, for instance, helps us respect the author of creation. We should aim at finding new models of development which are based not simply on utility and profit, but consider creation as a gift which is not limitless. This should be the basis of further research, making the factory more eco-friendly. So that is our realization today. But aside from that, aside from enhancing one's faith in the factory, faith is above all transmitted in the sacraments. We receive the faith in the sacraments not by individual effort, but as an ecclesial communion. Because our Pope Francis have said, no one baptizes himself. When a child is baptized, there's always the presence of the parents, godparents, the priest, the whole ecclesial body is there. But I would like to focus more here also about the Eucharist. You talk about eco-spirituality. The Eucharist as a cosmo-theandric bread. Cosmo because it is a fruit of creation. Theandric, which is the work of human hands. And Theo, because it's blessed by God. This was a talk given to us, Mindanao bishops, by a certain Jesuit priest from India, invited by the late Archbishop Kapalya during, I think, at one time when we had our gathering of Mindanao bishops. So you have the kind of eco-spirituality in the consecratory prayer. It's really manifested here. The presence of the cosmos, blessed by God, and also the work of human hands. But there, the use of ordinary bread and wine, in fact, the process of making bread and the process of making wine, somehow tells us about the experience of Jesus in his passion, death, and resurrection. That is why I've said, our faith in God, the God of creation, who makes use of his creation to remind us of the core mystery of our faith, the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ. The transformative power of the Holy Spirit makes this possible. And finally, the call for synodality as a church today. As a synodal church, we are called to be a church of communion, participation, and mission. And I would like to focus on communion here. People would express communion as bonding, human bonding. When family go together for outing, family bonding. When our priests go for an outing, they said, magbanding-banding sa ami, no? Banding-banding, some term for communion. So as a church, we are really a people journeying together in faith, enlightened by the Holy Spirit. And I would like to, again, of course, as a people called to be in communion, in mission, and to participate in the mission of Christ, the Holy Trinity is really the source of communion. We call the church as the icon of the Holy Trinity. Why I discuss this with us, because I was also trying to see how is this, can we forward? How is this related to another form of bonding? If we have human bonding, family bonding, this is also another form of bonding. That's chemical bonding. I was glad to see just a bulletin board right before that, in front of the hotel. Mag-Kim bonding tayo. Mag-Kim bonding. That means it is also used now, no? I was the one who noticed this. But yes, of course, this is a different field, but still bonding. My question is, does this Trinitarian communion, or is this the source of perfect communion, also be manifested in the whole of creation, in natural science? Can chemical bonding of matter, for instance, reveal and relate the Trinitarian communion? Or does this natural inclination for bonding portray a universal phenomenon of God's creation, since everything comes from one Creator, based on the principles of common origin, the source of communion, who is the Holy Trinity, and also, of course, the principle of interconnectedness. So can this chemical bonding also manifest God as the source of communion, of bonding? Of course, there are two types of bonding. I will not discuss that anymore. That's in chemistry. But does this bonding of elements also relate to human beings? Can we explain synodality as a church of communion, participation, and mission through chemical bonding? Being synodal with an ionic bond, it is telling us that this communion is primarily a gift. The electrostatic force that binds the two elements together is really a gift. And also, this could be a covalent bonding among human beings. But of course, we are looking for where can we find a cohesive bonding in the church. And we said the parish should be environments of living communion, participation, and completely mission-oriented. This is from the Second Plenary Council. This is also from the Mindanao Sulu Pastoral Conference. Basic Ecclesial Community started in Mindanao in the 1969 and during the MSPC in 1971. So this finds expression in BECs. So this is our BEC. This is a common faith. It's a love that binds or bonds them together as missionary disciples of Jesus. They're continually nourished by the Word of God, informed by it, and the Eucharist as the fount and apex of Christian life. But BEC is a process and a goal. It is always on the making. There's always a need for constant spiritual conversation to become an inclusive communion of God's people. And what we hope in our BECs, that our BECs will become not just a basic ecclesial community, but really to become basic human communities that includes everyone, fratelli tutti. In Hulo, they didn't call their BECs as BEC, but they call it BHC, including our brothers, sister Muslims in the community. But of course, with our consciousness now with regards to caring for our common home, BEC should also become basic ecological communities. So that includes all of creation already. So that is what we hope for of our BECs. So I would like to come now to the conclusion. First, as I've said, this presentation views more a personal relationship, a relationship of science and religion through theological reflections. It is always anchored on faith seeking understanding, and it is faith that bridges our experiences in the physical world together. Second, this affirms also the principle of common origin, the Holy Trinity as the source of perfect communion, and also of the principle of interconnectedness, inclusivity. The natural world also reflects God's nature so that it can lead us also of communion and of relationships. And there's no really separation between science and faith. Advances in science may not be a hindrance in deepening our faith, and our faith in God can also be deepened as we explore the world through science. Faith is our guiding light as we explore about creation. And knowledge in science, enlightened by faith, should be at the service of the common good. May we live with a common purpose and common mission towards the fullness of life by God's grace. And I would like, yes, of course, with this theology, we believe that the incarnate Word has truly penetrated the whole of creation, that all creation becomes an exemplar of God. And even Jesus himself, the Alpha and Omega of creation, even uses parables common in his time to be understood easily by the people. And I would like to end this with in Psalm 139 as we pray. You have searched, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the mountains, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. For you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Thank you very much for listening.